and officer here for the Detroit Public Library. So it's my pleasure to welcome all of you this afternoon to our special Color of Sci-Fi author event. It is also my pleasure to introduce Ms. Donna Jackson, who is the founder of DMJStudio, as well as the creator of the Color of Sci-Fi event. Ms. Jackson is going to come forward and introduce the authors, and we're so pleased with everybody being here this afternoon, and very much hope you enjoy the author event. So thanks for coming out.
Again, hello to everyone. Just a little bit about me. My name's Donna Jackson, owner of DMJStudio, which is a creative studio here in Detroit where we create things that matter really to me. As a woman, a person of color, urban dweller, and also a global citizen. And this has been like a joy, a thing that's been in my head for a year. I'm very happy to see you all at the beginning of it. This is the beginning of Color of Sci-Fi. I want to share even why I created it, outside of the fact that I love sci-fi. Who doesn't? I love sci-fi. It's speculative fiction, and I feel like there's so much power in it, and what's in sci-fi is what happens out here in this real world. So I think it's important for us to celebrate our own stories and our own storytellers and our own visual storytellers, and then also continue to share those stories so more of us know that they exist, because they exist. I think some people feel that this just happened in the last 5-10 years, but this has been going on for a long time. It's just finally people are seeing it more. So that's my spiel about Color of Sci-Fi. This is a series, and there's several things that will be happening throughout the month, but this is the first, and I am very grateful for these magnificent authors to be here to talk about their work, and also just about representation in science fiction and speculative fiction. So without further ado, let me introduce the authors. First, Damien Darrow Jerry is a writer, teacher, and MC. He holds a Master's of Fine Arts in Creative Writing from the University of Memphis. He is a 2020 FONA Fellow and a fiction editor of Obsidian, Literature and Arts in the African Diaspora. As a child, he read fantasy and comics. As an adult, he writes his own adventures. Damien writings appear and is forthcoming in African Rising, a new era of speculative fiction, Marvel, Black Panther Tales of Wakanda, the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, fireside fiction, Trouble the Water, Tales from the Deep Blue, and many other publications. So welcome. Zigzag Claiborne, also known as Clarence Young, wishes he'd grown up with the powers of either Gary Mitchell or Charlie X, but without the Kirk confrontation. And anybody not getting the Star Trek reference gets their sci-fi credit on 3 points. No, 10. 10 points. The author of The Brothers Jetstream's Leviathan, The Brothers Jetstream, Afropuffs Are the Antenna of the Universe, Neon Lights, Historical Inaccuracies, By All Our Violent Guides, and In the Quiet Spaces. He believes a writer can be like an actor, inhibiting a delightful variety of roles and genres, but his heart belongs to science fiction. His fiction and essays have appeared in Beck's Mosaic, Alt History 101, The Wayne Review, Flash Shot, Reverie Journal, and Stupefying Stories, to name just a few. Again, that's exactly that. Ladies, Cherie Renee Thomas is an award-winning fiction writer, poet, and editor. Her work is inspired by myth and folklore, natural science, and the genius of the Mississippi Delta. She is a co-editor of African Rising, a new era of speculative fiction, and Trouble the Waters, Tales of the Deep Blue. Her fiction collection, 9 Bar Blues, Stories from an Ancient Future, was a finalist for the 2021 Ignite, Locust, and World Fantasy Awards. She is the editor of the magazine of fantasy and fiction, fantasy and science fiction, associate editor of Obsidian, and also edited and 2-time World Fantasy Award-winning groundbreaking anthologies, Dark Matter, A Century of Speculative Fiction with the African Diaspora, and Dark Matter, Reading the Bones. She lives in Memphis, Tennessee, near a river and a pyramid. Can't get better than that. Denise Crittendon, did I right? Yes. Denise is an Afrofuturist, a dreamer, a creator of new and enchanting Black worlds. In her debut novel, Where It Rains in Color, Angry Robot Books is where it's published, she unveils Swazembi, a glitzy resort planet of floating colors and bizarre tourist attractions. Before conjuring up this paradise, she was a journalist for at least 3 decades, covering crime, politics, social issues, and human interest stories as a staff writer for the Detroit News and the Kansas City Star. So welcome to all of our authors. So I'm gonna get right into it, asking questions here. Before we talk about representation, let's talk about inspiration. So what inspired you to create works in speculative fiction, science fiction? Some people use them interchangeably, but I see them as 2 different worlds. So what was your inspiration? We're gonna start with Susanna.
Is the volume good on this?
Yeah.
Okay. So y'all heard Star Trek #1 for me when I was growing up, Twilight Zone. And just my neighborhood, I'm a Detroiter, born and bred, and still here. And growing up, everything around me was about taking something that existed and changing it into something else. If it was a game, we would change the rules of the game to do something else, make it more fun. If it was a toy, we would change the toy to make it more fun for us. So to me, that's the core essence of sci-fi, taking what's here and changing it. See not only just what you can do, but what can you do to make it better for you.
I agree with Star Trek and all of that. Thank you. I'm just going to go down the line. What's your inspiration?
Well, I was a journalist for so many years, and I enjoyed being a journalist. I don't want to knock that, but I felt kind of constrained. My imagination was always running away from me, and I can get ideas just looking at a puddle on the ground, looking at the shape of it. So I wanted to do so much more, and especially when it comes to people of the African diaspora. I felt like we're writing about the past, which we have to remember our history, but there's so much more out there, and we have this idea of the future is energetically pure. So I wanted to put a stamp on it. Marcus Garvey said that we should be looking ahead always every 50 years. I decided to look ahead 5,000 years, and I feel like 5,000 years from now, we have to have something better than this. So that's just my short answer, because we're going to be talking about a lot of things. But like Zigzag, I'm a Trekkie, so I would watch Star Trek, and they always go to these different worlds. And when they went to a world that was beautiful, and that was people were supposed to be beautiful, they were always blonde hair and blue eyes. That was the utopia they always conjured up. I'm not mad at them. They were creating their reality, but as someone of African descent, my reality. And I won't talk too much about the Star Trek. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, my imagination was on fire, and I wanted to just
Should we say question?
Hey, can you hear me? All right, hey, so my inspiration came from my family. I was fortunate to be born into a family of storytellers in Memphis, Tennessee. My grandparents were from West Tennessee, Mississippi. And so I grew up around people who were great, wonderful storytellers who love to tell scary stories. So they told us about hangtails. Those are, spirits who come ride you at night. And if you know anything about sleep paralysis, it's not fun. Okay. They would tell us true stories, historic things that happened to them, that were quite frankly scarier than the things that we watched on TV, to be honest. And so I was that child that was always in the ear hustle. So I'm listening to the scary stories and being terrified at night, loving that thrill. So I understood the power of storytelling just from listening to them. It made me want to read and write my own scary stories. Science fiction became a love language of our family. So.
Hello, everyone. I grew up reading comic books. I started reading comics at a very early age, like in elementary school. My uncle had a big comic book collection, like in the shed behind our house. And I used to sneak back there and read them because he didn't want me touching them because I was a kid. He said I was going to tear them up, which I did. But that started, and reading comic books took me to mythology. And I will also say, when I was a kid, my granddad used to tell me stories about Brer Rabbit. I had no idea that he was telling me stories that came from Africa. I didn't learn that until later. So that started it. I grew up reading these like fantasy, and I got into horror. I was reading a lot of Stephen King, and I had a friend, a black woman, and she said, "Oh, you like Stephen King? You need to read this." And she gave me Mind of My Mind by Octavia Butler. She said, "This is a book by a black woman who's writing the type of thing that you like to read." And when I read Mind of My Mind, it blew my mind, for lack of a better term. I had never, before that, I had never really seen me and my people as the full subject of a fantasy story like that. And then the writing was superb, the politics, the pacing, the characters, everything was there. So I knew I already wanted to do it, but when I saw Octavia Butler doing it on the page, that made me say, well, I'm gonna try my hand. I'm gonna try to do it myself.
Well, it seems like it all comes from environment, whether it be the environment of family, environment of city, that inspired us all to create these wonderful stories. I want to talk about or ask you about representation. I think a lot of times it's kind of seen as a monolithic thing, where it truly isn't. It depends on each person, what is the perspective of representation. So just want to ask, what, from your perspective, what is representation in science fiction like? What do you want it to be? What should it look like? And we'll start again.
For me, the baseline representation is, are you seeing an authentic soul being portrayed? Because it's not enough just to put a black person in this role. We've seen many instances where it's flat and it's useless. But let's say you watch, let's go back to Star Trek, you're watching Deep Space Nine, and you see Avery Brooks step on the stage. Avery Brooks brought a deep, authentic soul to that role. He wasn't just playing a black guy in a Star Trek uniform. He was playing a black man with a long history of blackness, that was something that didn't exist in Star Trek until he did that. And that was entirely him doing that. That wasn't the writers, that was Avery Brooks saying, I'm putting my stamp on it. So for me, that is representation. You get an actor like that, you get Chadwick Boseman, you get just so many people who come into a project, and even if it's a project that's from a mega corporation, or if it's something that's small and indie, they come in and they say, I'm going to give you an authentic piece of our history and our future. And enjoy that. That's wonderful.
Anyone else want to chime in on that? And I agree. I mean, Avery Brooks changed my life when it came to looking at science fiction on screen. Yes. I mean, also in the original series too, but he definitely changed my life. Anyone else want to chime in on that?
I'm just saying, for me, representation is a cultural touchstone. It is you placing your traditions, whether it's the way that you speak, whether you're code switching or not, whether it's your patois or creole or whatever, and you're putting it in a way that is respectful of that culture, authentic to the people from that culture, so that when they read it or experience that art, they don't feel like they're being talked down to, and they don't feel like they're translating it for another audience that isn't them. It is organic to the storytelling, it's organic to the work. I think about this wonderful woman behind me, Octavia, who said the 3 pictures behind us, who said that she didn't need representation when she was starting out. She just saw a Hollywood, B-movie film and said, I can do better than that, right? And so she set about writing and creating her own work. She became, though, a great symbol of representation for so many other people who came after her. It was in her work where I saw Black women and girls as the subjects of their own stories, as the heroines, as the heroes of their own adventures, making tough decisions, making tough choices, being placed in extraordinary circumstances, or sometimes extraordinary people being placed in ordinary circumstances that we can recognize and understand. Wildzy was my favorite. Kindred was important to me. And I loved her deep-heart science fiction stories as well, because she made us challenge the ways that we thought about Black life and present in those works. So representation is everything. We see it all around us. We know what it looks like, but we don't have it. And if you're an educator, or have ever been an educator, or even a guardian of young souls, young spirits, a parent, or what have you, a mentor, you know what that power is when a child sees themselves fully represented in the world. It gives them permission to dream.
Anyone else want to add to that?
I'd like to add to that, especially when you talk about our young people, because in our audience today, we have several young ladies from Spain. Not from Spain, from Dove Academy. Sorry, because that's where I started. I have a self-help book for teen girls called Girl in the Mirror. And because they're reading that as a project, they wanted to come into this. Now, when I used to go out and talk to young girls about self-image, one of the things I realized is that we're still stuck as African Americans in that whole struggle with skin tone. I think that if we're going to focus on representation, we need to make sure that we represent every aspect of us, and that includes our appearance. Now, some people think that my novel, Where It Rains in Color, is about beauty. It is and it isn't, because what it is doing is shifting the narrative, and it's basically saying that we're reclaiming who we are. My protagonist is not beautiful despite the fact that she's not. She's beautiful because she's not. And that's what's real important, and that's what I see as representation. I see it celebrating the melanin, and I see it celebrating our hair. I mean, the double, every strand of our hair is like a double helix of the DNA. That's powerful. We can't expect a European writer to explore that, but we can. So there are different ways to represent, and that's the way I choose to do it.
I'll be very brief. For me, representation is about voice, giving voices to the voiceless, right? It's about me seeing myself in the thing that I read. It's interesting that we're bringing up education. So like you can come up reading books and not only never see yourself, but the things that you read can often take you for granted. I think about the work of Faulkner. I think about the work of Hemingway, even Stephen King, who sometimes in some of his older work may drop an N-bomb. So imagine being a child and the book pretty much that you love is deriding you at the same time, right? That's the reason that representation is so important. We need artwork that considers us, right? The consumer or the object, the subject. We need our artwork to take our own feelings and even more than that, our lives into consideration.
Lately, we've seen in mainstream media stories that make like European stories where they just place a brown or black face in it, and for them, that is representation representation, that is diversity, that is, you know, checking of the box. And that's not just in our films and our shows, but you're also starting to see that in our writing. So how do you feel about that? Is that progress? Is that just, what do you feel about that type of representation in the work to anyone that?
I'm sorry. Because I'm gonna give a couple of examples, since I was just talking about Steve. One is a great book, a lovely movie, The Green Mile. You have this black man who has this incredible telekinetic ability, right? He is massively strong, yet all of his power, right, none of it is used to help himself, none of it is used to help his own people. There's another character in The Dark Tower named Susanna Dean. The Dark Tower is one of my favorite stories by Stephen King. I'm talking about stories I love, right? But Susanna Dean falls flat as a character because what you see mostly from her is anger. Also, she's crippled, and she's the only character in that group who is crippled, right? So it would have been, it's almost as if Stephen King would have done well with a sensitivity reader for his black characters, right? So for me, that's part of the problem with that kind of representation. It sort of takes marginalized people and marginalized voices for granted.
Yeah, there's a thing in the mainstream where they consider representation, like say you're watching a horror movie. Black guy dies in 15 minutes, but you were represented. That's how they see representation. As long as there's a body there, it's a black person, it's a woman, whatever that they decided, this is the representation. You're only there to fulfill a very narrow role. You're there to die, you're there to be the sacrificial person, you're there to be the ear, the confidant, the best friend, but you're never there as an actual human being. And that is not representation. Representation has to involve the whole person, the whole culture, the whole soul, just like Sheree was saying. It's not a simple surface level thing. So another example that I could quickly give in books. I love the Dune books. I mean, I've read them all. But reading them now, I can barely stomach them because there is very little representation of the actual peoples that they are modeling from in those books. It's all coming from the point of view of Frank Herbert, was a white guy, saying, well, this is kind of sort of what this might be like if I put a bunch of people from Middle East on a planet and see what happens. And that's a big difference between that and somebody like Saladin Ahmed writing a book. Oh, I love him. Another Detroit, Michigan writer, Saladin Ahmed. If you don't know him, check him out. But there's a big, big difference between just plotting a body down, saying, oh, okay, there you go, and actually giving readers, audiences, or anybody who appreciates art a true experience into another soul.
It's Libra season, I just want to say. So in true Libra spirit, I'm with two minds on this. With representation, when it goes wrong, right? One of the things that always stood out for me is having black characters or whatever the person is, right? In the future, speaking with a British accent and not having an actual black family be a part of the community. So we were supposed to believe that they somehow just sprung up, I don't know, Athena from Jesus' forehead or something. And without mama, grandma, auntie, cousin, sister, lover, no one, right? And that's somehow supposed to be the future that is representative because they checked out what boxes that we cast this actor. But what does that tell us about where we are in the future and our place? It doesn't tell us anything very good, right? So that's an example with when it goes wrong, right? Because you love whoever you love, that's the world, and we're all here together. But I would love to see black families in the far future, 5,000 years from now, right? Still existing, whatever that looks like. But as black culture, we, people of color are the most people on the planet Earth. Aliens were to come and see who who are humans, most of them are gonna be Africans, Chinese, and Indians. That's what it is. But our art doesn't always reflect that, and the international stories that we tell each other around the world doesn't reflect that. We know the global economy doesn't reflect that either. The other thing I'm thinking about in terms of the way that you frame this is having Black characters just dropped in, right, and roles. I feel like where I'm on the other side of it also, let these people work. I'm happy that they can finally be cast with things that don't necessarily rely on Black identity or Chinese identity or whatever the particular cultural ethnicity is. Let these actors work. Let us see all of these people in different roles, right? Robert Townsend did the whole joke about these Shakespearean trained actors having to play Robert and thugs and things, but they could be, Othello, or they could be anyone, right, really, Macbeth, right? But they didn't get those opportunities. So let them work when they can. And actually, what we've always been struggling for, I know in literature, but perhaps it's in other genres too, is access to the rainbow of human existence. Let us be mediocre too. You know what I mean? We don't always have to be Octavia Butler and James Baldwin and Dorville Hurston and Ralph Ellison and Alice Walker to get a book deal. Let us write some little dusty, hot boilers like everybody else and live and enjoy the entertainment each other. So if we can always have access to playing all these roles, right? Then that will be progress, right?
Yeah, it does seem that as Black and brown people that the exceptional, we think must be exceptional in order for it to be released or expressed or shared, and that's not always the case. And you can't grow. Sometimes you got to do the mediocre to get to exceptional. Denise, you want
Yeah,
to add?
well, one last comment. You can't hear me, I don't hear this. One last comment, because you brought up Frank Herbert and you brought up some people. I was a big Frank Herbert fan, but doing a few other books, and I was startled to find out that you could be a science fiction writer, delving into different worlds and creating different cultures, but then when it came to people of color, it was still frozen in time. And there's one novel by Frank Herbert called The Whipping Star, and people in this era, in this future, these guys have the ability to jump through something called an SI door. So you're standing somewhere, just any place in space, the space would open up and you could jump through it, and you would end up anywhere on another planet at a different point in time, whatever. So he jumps through this SI door, and it's a planet where there are Black people, and I couldn't believe it. We're slaves. And I just shook my head. I said, are you serious? You have this incredible imagination. And we're in the future, it's still the slaves. And then there was another line in another one of his novels where there was a Black character. He was a waiter, ordinary person. But the metaphor that he used is what upset me. He said, the waiter, I looked at something like a Black man eyeing a white man's shiny city. And I was like, Frank, come on now. What kind of a metaphor was that to use? And so that's what I think you mean when you talk about representation that goes wrong, right? Right, Sheree?
Can I just jump on that? Because we also need representation from publishing. Because if we had someone else was in that building, and I started off my book career as an editorial assistant, the first floater at Random House. Because I wanted to be what Tom Morrison was. And learn, if I'm going to have a day job as a writer, it's going to be where the books are being sold and made and everything. And the thing about it is, if you had other people in the room, they wouldn't have allowed that to make it through. They would have questioned that. That would have been circled. And the question would have been, can you do better than this?
Come up with
Come
a
up with better.
metaphor or analogy or
Yeah.
description.
Yeah.
And he's a good writer.
Yeah, he's a great writer, but you have to, like you said, have that imagination. And if we don't have representation on the business side of things, there isn't going to be a lot of progress. We're all coming through this career, going through all the different stages when, like, Dark Matter came out, where people didn't even believe that Black people wrote science fiction or read. And we've always been a part of the bottom line of every genre of the country, right? Every genre, we're there. You may not show up in costumes all the time. You may not be in your book signing, but we're out there buying the books. I always say to our family, we pay for at least one Stephen King vacation, at least. In our lifetime, at least. But representation in the publishing side of it, editors, agents, art directors who do the covers. Octavia Butler had to, she had struggles over the covers of her books. They didn't want to put Black people on the covers of her books, even though those were the main people in her science fiction and fantasy novels, work. So we've come a long way. We still have battles to fight, but representation is all the way around a powerful and important touchstone.
That kind of goes into one of the other questions when we talked about, we kind of touched on those characters that we might see on TVs or films, but what about those that are writing in there, those that are creating them? How do we get more people of color the opportunities to be seen and to get into these mainstream? We're doing the work, but how do you feel like there are more opportunities now to be seen in these mainstream areas so those stories can be told and seen? Or how do you feel about that? Anyone that wants to jump in?
Well, I was published by Angry Robot Books under a very unique initiative, and during the George Floyd protests and the Black Lives Matters movement, publishing industry started doing some self-examination because people were buying more Black books. Maybe, I don't know if that's just a phase, a fad, a trend still going on. You know more about this. Okay, so it's like in that flippant time when everyone is riled up and they want to be part of this movement. But during that flippant time, Angry Robot Books, based in the UK, part of Watkins Media, they looked at their roster of authors and they really only had 2, maybe 3 Black authors out of more than 100. And so they created a Black Writers Matter initiative. And so I kind of got in through the back door. I was the first writer accepted through that. Now, whether it's still going on, they said it is. I haven't seen anyone else, but like anything else, I think things fizzle. I mean, I think some of the very allies who are out marching from that movement may have moved on and forgotten about it. So it's hard to say if it's changing, but every now and then you just have this effort made, and we have to get our foot in the door.
I think about something that publisher Bill Campbell of Rosario Publishing, and that's another name that you should check out, told me years ago about the publishing industry in particular, but this is just America, in a nutshell. And he said that the industry is not built for inclusion. And that stayed with me, and that's still true today. The industry is not, no industry in this country is built for the inclusion of us. It's built to use us. What's happening now is with technology, with everything that's gotten so much easier, you have indie authors, small presses. They don't need the machinery that the big people have. They can do it themselves. And the more that we do that, the more people are seeing there are alternatives, there are inroads to take. So you have all these artists now, writers, just like with the music industry, where it just took off. Everybody had their own label, basically. You're seeing that happening in publishing now. And the big publishing companies not only are taking note of it, but they're a little bit afraid of that because that's a measure of power being taken away from them. So if we are to make the inroads and stay there, if we're to be in those rooms where we see Frank Herbert, the next Frank Herbert, write something like that, before there might have been a Black person in the room, they would have been ignored if they pointed it out. Now, that's not the case. Well, it's the case, but now you're liable to catch hands if you do say, no, be quiet, we want to use this.
And this makes me think about music or art or anything that you want to see, you need to support. If you like a particular writer, you need to go and buy their books and read their work. Just like if there's a particular rapper you like, you need to buy their music. Because in the publishing business, that is a big part of it, right? We have to support things that we want to see out in the world. And when we think about Black Panther, that movie came about because you had, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of Black people who had read that comic, who were working and who were calling for diversity, right? After the X-Men came out, Avengers, whatever, right? People were saying, we want to see Black superheroes. So Marvel was like, okay, well, we got something for you.
Yeah.
And they came with Black Panther. So that's support what you want and ask for what you want as individuals and as collectives.
Just to jump on that Black Panther thing, Black Panther worked because of who was behind the cameras. You know, if Tim Burton had done Black Panther, it would have been a whole different thing.
Right.
How do we get people of color in these spaces? Just like Denise said, creating specific intentional, because it's intentional. I don't buy the whole bias stuff. I think that's the plan. And what is a better term for it is it's a deflection, right? It's quite intentional. So to address intentional harm, you need intentional solutions and restoration of justice.
Say that again, please.
To address intentional harm, you need intentional solutions to address and restore those things. So that initiative for Angry Robot, whether they're continuing or not, I don't know. But Denise is an example of that. When you're looking for us, you can find us because we've been there. You know, my book is showing that we've been there over 100 years in English alone. Unless we can go on to speak about other traditions around the world and throughout the African diaspora. I was at Random House, an initiative as well, in a floating program, but it wasn't necessarily for people of color. Walter Mosley tried to create a publishing initiative with the Penn Open Book Society. Very quickly realized that they just wanted to have panel discussions.
Yeah.
And he kept
Right.
moving. He has books to write, and
Right.
not time to play games with people who have the power to make their institutional changes. Right after the George Floyd protest, all these agents were saying, "Oh, send us your open pitches. We're looking for you. I want to represent." What came out of the publisher pay me? Look up the hashtag publishers pay me that Justina Ireland, Black science fiction writer, and Tochi Yamaguchi, also Black science fiction writers, created. It showed the disparity and intentional inequity in terms of what Black writers were being paid. Even very, very famous ones where whole cities are reading their books, like Justin Ford. And it also talked about the fact that a lot of these agents didn't actually respond to any of the queries. Not even to say this is not a good fit, right? So it was performative. So be aware of performative things and the easy things that people do. The other initiatives that are important, you have to have people in the room. You have to hire people, and you have to make them create this environment where they can survive and be there. I know what it's like to be the other Black girl. I was the other Black girl in Random House, but I was fortunate because the other Black girls in Random House were all amazing, and we're all doing great. One went on to become a romance author, and one wrote for fashion magazines. Some of the stuff has been adapted into movies. Another is an editor at Scholastic, and also a children's writer herself, Tina Williams was the other one. So we did fine, even though most of the Black people in the building worked in the building. So you have to not only just have us in these spaces, but you also have to create the space for us to thrive and not do the usual, what I call Becky 101 games, where, they're doing all the, are you okay? I saw you came in 5 minutes late the other day. And then, like they're, have you seen Damien? Have you seen Damien? And Damien's at the water cooler with the rest of the people, but they put the other. So there's all these strategies that they do across multiple genres, not just in publishing. We've seen it. TikTok has opened the world for people to talk about those work experiences, being thrown off the glass ceiling or the glass cliff, and make it a space where you can thrive and that you are promoted and that your work is honored, that work that you do, so that you can create the space for others to be there as well and help inform the culture of the publishing houses so that they're not holding back what's being published. Because the reason why indie publishers are doing so well now is because some of them tried to go to the traditional publishing houses But if you don't have anyone who knows anyone Black in their actual real life, or their one Black friend isn't a weirdo, right? But or their one Black friend isn't actually anti-Black, which is the thing, right? Then they have a very limited view on what's possible out there. And so they're shutting down projects that could be beautiful and amazing just because they've never conceived of it before and they don't have a reference, right? And it's not that we're monolithic as a culture, we absolutely are not. But you need to have people in those spaces who are educated and informed. When I worked at Random House, there were people who knew no Black people. I was the only Black people they knew. And they swore they knew more about Black people than white people. Publishers are very aware that their work is a culture making enterprise. They're very much aware of their gatekeeping position. And they believe that they are the ones that should make the decisions on the 55,000, 60,000 books that are published in English every single year. So right now, a lot of the Black women who were hired during the George Floyd protests, guess what happened to them? Just guess.
Laid off.
Laid off immediately. And I've seen that twice in my 3 decades of being in publishing. I've seen that cycle, that pendulum twice already.
So how do you all think that, I mean, George Floyd, that we all know that's been a moment that did shift something, at least for that matter. How do we go from just a shift to literally true progression, not just, oh, we're going to go back to what we were before that horrible murder happened, or that horrible experience happened? How do we do that with our work and with our art and with our all of these things? And yes, what you experienced in publications, I saw it in visual arts too. We saw it everywhere. But how do you keep moving that along instead of going right back to the standard status quo?
By what you're doing.
Okay.
By what you're doing, creating your own institutions, pouring your love into those institutions, opening the door so that other people can come and support your dream. You're doing it. You're an absolute example. This libraries program is the example of that, right? Who knows what other hundreds of other possibilities are going to happen from the people who've been here today and will go out into the community and do other things.
Exactly.
Institution building.
We have young ladies there from Delta County, high school kids, middle school kids, living in this time.
I think see, the thing is, we have always done the work. And I mean, everybody in this room has always done the work. And only way it continues is, like you said, do it. Do it, read it, support it, write it, live it, love it. If you don't do that, the work still continues. But you're going to get, for every one Denise, for every one Sheree, for every one Daniel, you're going to have 1,000 mediocre white dudes, let's be honest, because most of them will be white dudes, putting out stuff that buries the true work. And I'm sure you want to get into this later, but that kind of goes into what is the purpose of Black sci-fi, Afrofuturism, and whatnot. So,
Well, yeah, let's talk about futurism. So you want to chime into that before we talk about that?
Yeah, really quickly, keep doing it and also keep pushing it forward. Do different things. Take what's going on now and add your own flavor to it and do something different so that it keeps progressing, right? That's what I want. Just move forward. And I feel like our young people are very, very important with that, because for me, I'm a teacher, and what I find is that young people take what you give them and they do things with it that you didn't intend for them to do, right? So
yeah. One last thing on that, because this got the pastor sermon, the pastor in me is coming out. With science fiction, you will often hear the word escapism. Science fiction, fantasy, horror, it's always escapism. That word is a lie, because nobody in this room, none of these writers here at this table put anything out there for you to escape from. They put things out there for you to build with, and there's a huge difference. The mainstream industry is built on escapism, because they want you to continuously pump money into them. Yes, we want your dollars. Don't be wrong. We do need the money because we gotta eat too. But that is not the bottom line of what we do. And that ethos alone is what keeps us moving forward and keeps us evolving.
I've seen the word escapism, and even I've used it sometimes, but I never felt like it was an escape. I felt like, oh, this is inspiration from it when I'm reading science fiction from different cultures, from different authors, with different perspectives. So when we talk about futurism, like Afrofuturism is huge for us. It's in our music, it's in our books, it's in our clothing, it's in everything. But there are other futurisms as well. Right? So what do you think about that Afrofuturism is in science? Where do you use, what's the triangle or what's the hierarchy? Afrofuturism, science fiction, speculative, where do all of these things fit together? Because sometimes that could be something that could confuse the conversations as well. Like, where do they fit together, and how do you share a little bit of futurism for? Because there's so much great inspiration and content.
I see all of the genres. I see sci-fi and horror and fantasy is all falling under the umbrella of speculative fiction, because when you write speculative fiction, you're answering the question, what if? So you're looking at it as an alternative. And that's why Afrofuturism is so important, because we're saying, what if melanin was revealed? What if we discovered that it's really a superconductor and it's something that can take us to a higher level? What if we decided that every strand of our hair was just a lie? What if we moved forward into a future where we were ruling a galaxy rather than just considered at the bottom rung of the galaxy? So what we're doing with Afrofuturism is exploring a new way of thinking and creating a new Black aesthetic, so that we're not mired in lower thinking, because it's really important to examine where we are. But if you just continue to look at where you are, you're going to stay there, because that's just the common basis of law of attraction. You attract what you believe, you attract what you think, you attract what you think you are. But if you want something better, you have to see something better. So as we look ahead, and which is what Afrofuturism does, we're not just pretending we are, but we aren't. Because to me, the worlds are very real. And you look at even Red Record, 451, what does he happening now? With books, and books are being burned in Fahrenheit 451. And we look at Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower. So we know that sci-fi writers have predicted the future and continue to predict the future. So as we look out at that blank canvas and we say the past may be stained, the future is absolutely spotless, what else can we create? What can we do that's better than what we already have?
If you can add on, and then I want to give a chance for some of the audience to ask questions. And then
I did an article, an essay for the New York Times on this topic. And one thing about it, we like to talk about repetitive stuff, right? Is that sometimes science fiction writers are predicting the future, but a lot of times it's just stating what is the present. And because we don't change the systems that create that present, it looks like we're predicting the future, but it's the same thing. So Octavia Butler wrote Parable of the Sower, which and Parable of the Talents, which I reviewed for the Washington Post Book World. So that quote on her book is for me. But she was actually talking about the world that she lived in the 80s, right? Bill Clinton said "Make America Great Again." It's a term that's been used multiple times in politics. It didn't come from Trump. And the gated communities were already happening in Pasadena and other parts of California. Black women and girls are undervalued continuously. So that's not something that's a prediction of the future, hopefully, but it is a reflection of the present, right? And of the past. So one of the things that we can think about is a lot of these terms are real estate terms for booksellers and for publishers, right? They're all fiction. Science fiction is just fiction that the science is so important to the storytelling that if you took the science part out, you would have a story. So think of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. You don't have a story if you take out the operation and, and all that. H.G. Wells, the time machine, there's no story about the time machine, it's science. Fantasy is when you have your own system of rules and your own logic, your own magic, and it's consistent for that world. Horror is all kinds of different forms of horror, but it's actually creating that sense of dread in your reader. So these are just terms that we use to move the work around. And a lot of writers are writing across genres. They are mission and matching all the things. I like to do multiple things sometimes in stories, and not just stay firmly in one lane. So, that's a whole thing.
Did you want to, before I open up?
Brief. I like something I heard Stephen Barnes say. This is Black mythology. This is our mythology, and we're creating it and living it in real time.
That was short and brief. I have like so many other questions, but I want to give the audience a chance to ask if they have any questions of these great authors and creators and storytellers. Anyone have a question? Do you have a microphone back there for anyone? No? So, yeah, do you mind to stand up and ask your question? Oh, yeah. Thank you.
No.
I guess.
Whatever, I'm up here. So, okay. All right, my name is Cameron. I'm a full-time artist. I've been doing this now for about about 4 years. Anyways, my main question is that I know a lot of times, this is with a lot of just young creators in my social circle, it's doing like Black art that's, more in the sci-fi realm, more experimental realms, up through painting, murals, clothes, a whole bunch of, all over the place creatively. But a lot of times it's really frustrating and difficult to manage the creative world, especially in like predominantly Black spaces, doing more off. I'm not off, more like sci-fi related work. A lot of times it's hard finding funding for that type of style of work. I've been in spaces before, I've heard like it's not Black enough, it's weird, it's creepy, it's scary, it's all these things, and so it's hard. That's the main reason why I'm here, and I was so attracted to this panel discussion, just because I just know what it's like trying to find funding and just an audience that's looking for that type of work, so it's discouraging sometimes, and I just want to know what would be a good way of navigating that, finding community within that, and just going forward, making that type of work.
Anyone else to answer?
Join, there are a couple of organizations that you can join where you can build community. Afrofuturism 2.0 is one. Afrofuturism 2.0 is one where there's like filmmakers, dancers, writers, playwrights, artists, all kinds of people. The Black Speculative Arts movement, by Dr. Ronaldo Anderson, and the artist, John Jennings, who's a graphic novelist and has his own imprint, Megascope, from W. Du Bois's one of his stories. He works with Abrams. And so they are actively collaborating with visual artists on the books that they create. So reach out to them.
These are like, this is like social media pages, or like these are actually like the
Like they have like all the things. So you just Google it, you'll find it.
And what you said it called?
Afrofuturism 2.0. That's on Facebook.
Yeah.
Black Speculative Arts Movement. Just look for Dr. Ronaldo Anderson. John Jennings, his press is called Megascope, and it's with Abrams' book, Harry Abrams. Article. That's a good group. What's the State of Black Science Fiction? That's Jarvis Sheffield, right?
No, that's Milton. Jarvis.
Milton. Oh, Milton is. Oh, that's like Tacticon. Yes. He's based in Georgia, but he has community all over the country. So look for Milton Davis. He has his own press.
Black Science Fiction Society.
Black Science Fiction Society is Jarvis Sheffield. And then Maurice Waters is in Philadelphia. I mean, we're everywhere. Like there are literally people from coast to coast that you can be networking with, and they'll help you.
Yeah.
Yomi Odom does a East Coast Black comic book artist. And they give out awards every year.
What's good?
His name is Yomi, Y-O-M-Y, last name O-D-O-M. They give out this amazing award every year to comic book artists. So, like, you will not be alone, and they can help you figure out how to get funding. Or when you do your own Kickstarter or your own GoFundMe for your specific project, and they've done that for individual projects or art shows, they go and donate the money and get it started.
So, yeah. All right, cool. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
One other thing, yeah, get out and hit these conventions too. And, and reach out to these Black creators. A lot of them are like very down to earth and they will help you. Since you mentioned funding, I want you to look up, Kepra Institute, KHEPRW. KHEPRW. Kepra. It took me a while to figure out how it was pronounced. It's actually a word for things like an African word for beetle. And there's a brilliant author named Maurice Broadus, who was like the Afrofuturist of the Kepra Institute. And I know for a fact that if you reach out to the Kepra Institute, they will give you information. They will give you information on how to get funding. That's what they do.
Yeah.
So yes, Kepra Institute. I just want to add.
And he's based in Indianapolis.
Yes, he's based in Indianapolis, which is kind of this way. It's not far.
I just got a job down there, so.
All right.
Oh,
right there.
if you have a job down there, definitely need to hook up with the Kepra Institute. They will literally put you to work. I
They're
promise.
buying land, they're taking houses from their community that are falling apart and rebuilding them. They're putting young people to work, young people putting them to work. They're doing all the things. They're really powerful.
That is
Yeah.
literally
Real-time
Afrofuturism at work right
Yeah,
there.
Afrofuturism, yeah.
But yeah, definitely look up the crowdfunding stuff, the Kickstarters and all that. Those work for people at all kind of levels. I got one out there right now myself. There's this author named Brandon Sanderson, he's a huge writer. He did one and got a ridiculous amount of money. So people are hungry to find new stuff. So definitely look into those.
Well, I mean,
What's your medium?
Everything.
Everything.
Like,
So,
everything.
so figure out what it is that you want to create. Like, you created this beautiful exhibit here. So what is it that you want to create? Figure out what it is, jot down all the things that you need for it, and then get out there selling that vision.
you inspired me because that's the same thing. I mean, this is something that I know is needed, and we want to grow it for those that are creating now and for those that are creating in the future. And we continue to make those spaces. There's always room for something.
And be discouraged. There's no way not to be discouraged at times, but always find your joy in what you're doing.
Right.
You find your joy, you will keep going.
And next time you come out, put on something that you made. Bring your
Oh,
art.
this me right here.
All right, but you just gotta
This,
start with
this,
that.
this.
You gotta
all right
lead
here.
with
Oh,
that.
that. Yeah,
You
that's
gotta
right.
lead with that.
You buried the
This is
lead.
my art.
Well, I'm trying to word that question right.
Yeah,
I
right,
was thinking
that's,
about wording that question right though. But thank you, though. I
yeah,
appreciate it.
your name and then that, that's right.
Exhibition, so, does anyone else have a question before we, adjourn and get to book buying and selling? Anyone else have a question?
Oh, somebody's about to-
Is it working? Yeah, it's working. My name is
We need to post it up.
Little louder. I'm an artist and designer, and I come from, so a lot of the times, when characters that
create for, art or story, there's going to be like, or different cultures and stuff. There's more of it, so I wanted to know like how you all go about researching and learning or supporting people in China. Appreciating that a lot of Black people all over the world have similar experiences, but also they're not lost.
That's an interesting question because in my novel, I did exactly what you said. I did homogenize, but I did it deliberately. I mean, as my protagonist looks back to the ancestors and communicates with the ancestors, she's dealing with ancestors from West Africa. So I will really state Europe, or I'll say this is the Devon tribe from Mali or West Africa. The only one that I didn't identify, I did use a little bit of Osa, because I have a character named Kosi, and I didn't identify that. But with all of the others, I did identify what part of Africa, and I do understand that there is a sensitivity to that. There are some people directly from the continent who feel like they're being minimalized if you take African culture and you make it like a image or something. But I think that if it's in the future and we've all come together, I thought it was okay. Now you tell me, is that offensive to do that, especially if it's identified like Ashanti or Yoruba and all of that?
I feel like when it comes to international features, it can be hard to know, what is or isn't because we're not there yet. But like since you said that you made those identified, and that made it easy by a lot of people. And it's hard not to have someone indicating anything.
I think this is an issue that African writers themselves debate.
Yes.
So I've like, for example, what's the one that Children of Blood and Stone. There were people, Nigerians, who took issues with things like that as well. They are hormones with things that aren't necessarily of a particular Nigerian culture. Nigeria was created by a British business. It was a business, so it wasn't even an individual country. So it's hundreds of tribes, right? Speaking many different languages. So I feel like even Nigerians have to do research. And when they're doing research, they're using some of the same sources that other people in the diaspora use. Because most of the research, unfortunately, on their culture is coming from British people. So unless you're immortal and your grandma is immortal and has lived through all the different ages of Nigeria, you're imagining still, right? So writers have a duty to do due diligence, to try to build community and have people who, as we call beta readers, who really to read your book or your story, and you should honor what they say, because a lot of times people get beta readers because they want to be rubber stamped, but you have to be willing to go throw something out completely if they tell you, nah, this is not going to work, and these are the reasons why. You have to be willing to do that. But there isn't this kind of finite thing, because even people who've been in America for 30 years, they don't know what the people who live in Nigeria right now, who've been in Nigeria all those years, know. They're gonna be differences. I think I have that patient family that adopted me, and they are called Black when they go home, because they know you're clearly American, you're clearly New York, or you're clearly from Miami, or you're from Montreal. They're not Haitian from here, even though you have the bloodline of the roots. They're speaking everything differently, right? And you're doing the recipes slightly differently because you've been in America, right? So just the due diligence part, that's important. And the awareness that of the question that you said, the awareness that this is something that you can do that can be harmful, right? But the wonderful thing about where we are right now at this point in time is that Africans around the continent are writing and publishing their own science fiction. Caribbeans are writing and publishing their own science fiction. The diaspora is publishing their own. And so we're getting a diversity of things that they weren't willing to do before. And I know because I asked some of them to do it, and they didn't want to do science fiction because it wasn't seen as literary. They didn't think it was going to build their careers. But now it's a different era, right? It's a different era. This is not 1998. This is 2023. And 2 stories from Afrofuturism, just won the King Prize. And I had 2 stories from that book get nominated as finalists. That is historic. That is unheard of to have science fiction stories be honored in that way. So we're in a different era. Africans across the continent and throughout the diaspora are telling their own stories. And we're so fortunate to be alive at this time.
To say that science fiction now is finally growing up. That's kind of like my blanket thought on science fiction, the state of it. It's finally growing up. It's not just, guys playing with their shiny toys and lightsabers anymore. It's a worldwide thing where the imaginations of people are coming together to show us possibilities, which is what science fiction is supposed to be.
Good morning. Thank you for asking that question because it speaks to your responsibility as an artist, but it speaks to our responsibility as artists as well. And I would say that we are living in a great age because of the internet where we can communicate with each other. So you can communicate with someone from a particular place in Africa. And you said your background is Nigerian, right? So for you as a creator, definitely your own family, right? Because your family knows Nigeria, and whether it's your parents, grandparents, so mining the resources that you already have. And also I would say, just like reach out to people and be particular about who you're reaching out to and purposely. Thank you.
If no one else has a question, got one more, so we'll take one more question and then, yeah. I love it, it's the younger generation, that's what it is.
Does this work?
Yes.
My question is, earlier, when it was brought up the fact that sometimes when Black women are like on camera in books, they are like, they're beautiful instead of despite them being like they're beautiful because they're Black. And I was kind of like piggybacking off that saying, has anything ever happened to you personally as an author? People look at you instead of your work, they look at you for your scapegoat instead of your actual talent at work.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a good question. I don't think that there's anyone on this panel or in this room who's of color who could deny that that's happening. So yes, yes, and yes. But when I decided to come up with this character that was just brilliantly beautiful, shimmering Black woman, I wasn't even reflecting on my own experiences. I was just reflecting on Black women in general. The fact that still here it is 2023 and we're still denying what's naturally ours. And I mean, however your hair looks, whatever your skin tone is something that I want us to celebrate. And I just don't want it to be, like I said earlier, despite the fact that people are different. And I was seeing this in too many works, sci-fi and otherwise in literature, where you have a darker girl. The writer wasn't putting down the darker girl, but was still saying that the darker girl was feeling bad and she was pushed aside and she would overcome, and that would be the arc, that would be the journey of the character to overcome. And I didn't want it to always be something to overcome. I wanted it to be something to celebrate. So, and that to me is my gift to your generation, because I want you young ladies to grow up feeling so proud of who you are. And so this character, she's so dark, she's blue black and she shimmers. And then what I decided to do is just honor the entire rainbow. So if you're lighter, you're tawny dramatic, or you're tawny, if you're darker, you're indigo, you're rare indigo. And I did that deliberately. So I infused that message in Where It Rains in Color. And I'm not sure I'll do that with all of my novels as a debut novel, but it was so important to me before I leave this planet that I at least try to put a dent in that, so that I'm uplifting us. There's a song, Black Girl, Precious Little Girl, Let Me Lift You Up Where You Belong, and that just kind of like stays with me, and that's what I'm doing.
You and your crew, are y'all going into the arts?
I'm not sure.
Okay, crew. I'm looking right at you. Stand up.
Stand up. Oh, you stand up.
Yeah, Bill Academy, get up.
Don't be
We just, don't be shy.
Don't be shy.
Come on. Are any of y'all thinking about going to the arts? No? Some technology? What, okay, I'm not gonna ask you specifically what you're going into, but has anything that y'all heard here today helped you make a decision on something that you think you might want to do in the future? Okay. All right.
That's all we need. Yeah, it was a great question. So with all of that, there's so much to talk about with this subject. And I mean, we could have a panel with each of you individually. So first, thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom, your storytelling. And I hope that you all take time to, there are books being sold by each of these authors that you take time to support as we talk about and to enjoy what they created. This is just, again, the beginning of this. This is a month of different experiences, whether if we have films, we have a lounge where you can just come here and nerd out and talk about science fiction with whomever's here and listen to the music, look at the great t-shirts that we all wear, even cosplay. We have 2 opportunities to do that through the next month. And again, but this has been a great start to this. Yes, there's a list of all of the different details, all of the
There's a flyer
experiences that we'll have over the next month. And you can also find it on DetroitLibrary.org as well as DMJStudio. So thank you to all of the Zigzag, Denise, Damien, Sheree, you've been marvelous. And thank you, audience, for coming in on a Saturday, on this fall Saturday. I'm gonna keep saying that. And I look forward to seeing you. And here, this exhibit is here for a month, for the next month. Great artists, most of them are local. We have a couple that are one from Brazil, Chicago, and Georgia. So again, sci-fi is everywhere. So again, thank you for your time and have a good afternoon.